Hi, and welcome to another episode of Today's Parent, where we connect with experts and provide you with information to make your parenting journey a bit more easier. I'm your host, Christine Casina. On today's show, we are talking about a heavy topic. We are going to talk about loss and grief, how we can help families cope better, and especially for children in the family, how we can help them deal with death when it happens in the family. In studio today, I have our counseling psychologist, Esther Mbao, who's going to share various tips which I'm sure will be of help to you. Esther.
Yes, Christine.
Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Loss and grief in the family. Yeah. Something that is inevitable. You know, it happens and it's just part of life.
True.
But it's not something that is simple.
No.
So when it comes to, let's start with coping, just coping with death in the family.
Yeah.
What can you advise?
Even before we go to coping with death in the family, I like to say loss and grief is an everyday process. You need to ask yourself, how do I deal with loss and grief every day? Because grief is it's an immediate reaction of a loss. So when you lose your phone, how do you grieve it? When you lose your flash disk, how do you grieve it? When you lose some money, how do you grieve? When you lose a position, how do you grieve? And then when we're able to deal with the small losses, when the big losses occur, we've actually built muscle and we've built some coping skills of how to deal with death.
Right.
But the only best way to start dealing with death is to first understand that death is an inevitable passage that we all go through, and it happens when we least expect it. That's why it's very painful, and even when it is anticipated, because right now we're in an age where cancer is on the rise. Suicide is taking place every other day. It's not an easy thing to go through. Yeah. But we need to come to a place and say, you know what? Death is a stage of life and it's the final stage. But before then, have I understood what death is? You know, many of us don't understand what death is, or we've decided we don't even want to understand what death is. But it is a stage of life. The same way we keep saying aging is catching up, death will catch up with us at some point. So how do we cope with death? It is to first understand yourself from your personality. It is to first understand that grieving is a very personal, very intimate journey for yourself. And to also understand that with death comes the stages of loss and grief. It's not just something that you go through. It has steps, it is stages. Or sometimes you can go through the different stages and move through the different stages of loss and grief.
As an expert, do you think there's a way we can view death in a certain way to make it easier when it happens, you know, find a way to shift our perspective of how we look at it? I know death is a very painful thing, but coming from a professional, is there a way you can advise how we can, I know it's different for everybody,
yes,
but
it
how
is.
To view death?
I think I cannot give a blanket, you know, because of our perceptions, because of the experiences you've gone through. There's someone who's gone through so much death that for them now it's become, you know, it's okay for them. When death comes, they feel the pain, but they go through the process. But there are people who haven't had so many losses. So for them, death is still something that we don't talk about. Also, our culture informs how we view death. I know there are cultures in our country that really when they lose someone, they grieve completely. Yeah. Yet there are cultures, like where I come from, even looking at the dead person is like a taboo, or it's, you know, it's scary, you get nightmares. But I really affirm those people who mourn and they even look at, you know, they view the body, they cry out, they allow people to do what they're doing during the mourning process.
Right.
So
like celebrate their lives, the person who
yes, yes. So I can only say that you need to look at the determinants that are affecting how you view death. Your age, your culture, your experiences of life, your personality, even education level affects how you view loss and grief.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Then I feel of importance that we can focus on now.
Yes.
Tips you can share with families on how to cope with death.
Yeah. Because with families, they're individuals. I'll say first go back at an individual place. How do you deal with grief? Do you allow yourself to grieve as you grieve? If you're the crying person, it is okay to cry. If you're the silent person, there are people who just keep silent. Be silent, it is okay. And when you can allow yourself to grieve as you are, you can allow another person to grieve as they are.
Right.
One thing to tell the society, when someone is crying, don't stop the crying. Allow them to bring it all out, because that's emotion that is coming out.
Right.
But if we allow this emotion to remain repressed, what happens? One day it bottles up and it explodes. And it may not explode in tears. It may explode in road rage. It may explode in anger and outburst. So when someone is going through the grief process, allow them to go through it in their own way and
Right.
at their own pace. The other thing is, you don't need to push someone to cry.
And the
You know,
people
some of-
who are
yes.
generally just not criers.
Yes, or they cry behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And when they come to the front, they just don't want to cry in front of others. So what you need to do is just be there. That's a key thing I usually say. Be there for this family. When a family has lost a loved one, I love the way as Africans we come together. That's one thing I really affirm and we've held on to in our culture. That when we lose a loved one, we are there for the family, you know. If someone has, you've just had the news, you find the women going there, they start cleaning, they start making tea, they ensure the family is well fed, they ensure, at least during the grieving process, that this family, the basic needs are well taken care of. And that is something as Africans we need to take pride in
And continue to do.
with. That is an amazing way to start helping the family to deal with the grief.
Well put.
Apart from that, we also come in and help them to give their loved ones a wonderful send-off. I know it's been a bit controversial of late, but given what they have chosen, the fact that we support them and we allow them to send their loved ones through that celebration is also very commendable in our society.
Right.
But even as we're doing that, we need to keep checking on them at an individual level. Take time, sit with one member of the family, ask them how they're doing. How did they come to know about this news? How are they feeling, you know? Here and now, have they eaten? Have they drunk water? Sometimes when you're grieving, you forget to even just drink water.
True.
Yes. Have they taken a bath? How are they feeling even as they prepare for the final send-off? Do they have what they need? So what we need to do is now get people who are close to the family members to just take care of each and every one of them at an individual basis. They may not be able to sleep, but allow them time to rest. We also need to learn how to give them some time, some space, and
So
also
give them
be
space
there
as well.
Yes, we want to be there for them throughout, but we also need to give
Find
them
a way
space.
to give them space.
Yes, even as we're taking care of their basic needs. Emotionally, you need to just connect with this person. Sometimes we take care of the basic, you know, we go for the prayers,
Yeah,
the meetings,
the food.
but the emotional part is not well taken care
How
of.
can we do that?
Take this person for a walk. Take them a glass of water, sit with them in the room and just have a conversation with them. If they don't want to talk,
Just sit there with them.
Yes, let them know that you're there for them. That is enough emotional connection. Sometimes we don't need the talking, we just need the presence. And sometimes it's even said the best of conversations are done in silence.
Right.
So just be there, understand this person may not react as they would usually react.
Right.
Sometimes we expect that because these people talk when they have issues, they will talk during this time. Loss and grief is definitely one of those things that hits our system very, very hard. And that's why physically we are affected, emotionally, cognitively, socially, and even emotionally. All areas of who we are as beings are affected by grief. So we need to understand that this person may not react the way they normally react.
Right.
So it is okay to allow them to be. But like I keep saying, deal with your own grief, know how you deal with it, understand the stages, and there are stages of grief that we can highlight very quickly, and then be able now to get into the process and to support these people until the time they send off.
Right.
But the other thing I want to highlight to the society, what we usually do after the celebration, we take off as a society. But we don't know that when we take them back home, that this is when they also need
most as well.
Yes, they need our support the most.
It can be very lonely.
Because this is a place of readjustment. This is a place of coming to a reality that this actually happened. But then they're left all alone. So not all of us may go back, but a few of us have to remain with the family and walk with them. Because initially what happens during loss and grief, there's the shock. So someone is asking, has this really happened? Is this true? Is this a dream? So there are people who remain in shock until even the final celebration. And then when they come back, that's when it hits them. It actually is true. or the people who remain in shock for a few hours and then they come to a place of reality. But after the shock comes the anger, comes the depression.
So are these stages of grief?
Yes, these are stages of loss and grief.
So let's take them one by one. So the first stage is?
Shock.
So the first one, of course, is shock.
Yes, and it can last a few moments or it can last a long period of time. It also depends on an individual basis.
Personality and all that. So
yes,
many factors like you mentioned at the beginning.
Yes, given those factors, it varies. But after the shock, there's the anger.
So the second stage is anger.
And you're angry. You can be angry with God, you can be angry with life, you can be angry with even this person. Why did you go? How? Why at this point, you know? Why couldn't you stay on longer? Or you're even angry with yourself. Could I have done something different? Could we have done something to save this person? And with the anger, now also comes depression. Like, actually, this person is going. So you go on a low, you take a dip, and you start feeling a heavy sense of sadness. And this is not the clinical depression where you need to go get drugs.
Right.
There's a place where when you're depressed, it is normal because it is part of the process.
Right.
So when a person gets into depression, you need to work with them so that they can get out of it. This is where it can determine whether it goes clinical or they're able to recover, and then they're able to come to a place of acceptance and say, okay, this has happened, how do we move forward? And then with the acceptance come the readjustment and the reality of how do I begin a new reality with this person gone. Right. So those are the basic stages of loss and grief. And we all go through them in at different stages, at different points. And sometimes they get jumbled up. It's not linear.
Yeah. That will go through shock and then, anger and then...
Sometimes you get through the shock, you accept, you go back to the anger, you go to the depression, or you hear the news, you're depressed, then you get into shock. So it's a very personal journey that I can say. Okay. But we go through those stages at one point or another before we get to a readjustment place. Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you have any other pointers to share generally when it comes to coping, because what I want us to focus on when we come back from the break is children. So before we get to how we can help kids cope with death in the family, if you have any other pointers that come top of mind when it comes to coping, tips for coping with loss and grief in the family.
I think in conclusion, I'll say put the mask on first before you put on another person's mask, First, take care of yourself through the process, even as you're taking care of others. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, at some point, you may do more harm than good. So first, do take care of yourself, understand how you're going through the process, and then take care of others. Then we can move now on to the kids.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So we're going to take a short break. And when we come back from the break, we are going to tackle how we can help children cope with death in the family. Welcome back to the show. On today's episode, we are talking about loss and grief. And we have a question that has come in from Betty in Kisii. And her question is, how can we help kids cope with loss and grief in the family?
Yeah.
Esther, what is your take on that?
Let me first point out that children are usually neglected during the loss and grief process, especially the younger ones. It's like we assume they don't know what is happening, or it's too much for them, or we are trying to put them in this bubble. But life will happen, and the earlier we start imparting some basic life skills to our children, in as painful as it is, the better it is for them.
How early?
As early as 2 years.
So by two years, they understand what death is?
They may not fully understand, they may not grasp it, but they remember what you communicate to them. I've had clients who say, my father died or my mother died when I was 3, and no one ever told me. So I've never really had closure over it. The fact that this child can remember that they were never told, for them that has kept them stuck there. So they've not been able to deal with the loss and grief of a parent.
Right.
So the first thing is you need to tell this child what has happened. And that's why I keep saying to the parents, please understand what is death, so that you're able to break it down to them, and break it down to them in a language they can understand.
So how can you do that?
Please, the first thing we do, and let me put a disclaimer, don't tell them mommy or daddy is sleeping, because they will expect this person to wake up. You need to actually put it in a way that they know, in as much as they expect it might happen, that it actually won't happen, that this person won't actually come back.
Right.
And that is very painful even for us to accept. So you need to find it in a way to tell them, maybe so-and-so was unwell, or this and this happened, and so this person has died. Please don't ever say sleep or rested, because in the child's mind they're thinking, this person will actually do what?
Wake up.
Will wake up. But the reality is this person will never come back. So they also need to start dealing with that reality. As you're breaking the news, kindly let someone who's close to them be there. Usually, children have this favorite aunt or uncle that they feel inclined to. This aunt or uncle could be the one to break the news if it's not you.
Okay.
But don't let it be news from a stranger, or news on social media, or news on TV, or they come home from school and they find people there and people are crying and no one is telling them. This creates more confusion in a child whose life has already been destabilized. So don't destabilize it further.
Right.
Let them know. The other thing we need to know is a 2-year-old will not take in the news as a teen or a preteen. Between the 2 and 5, they might think this person will come back. They will keep asking the same question over and over and over. You say this person has done what? And after 5 minutes, you say this person has done what?
So how do you handle that?
Just keep responding to them. Keep being patient. Keep understanding that their level of critical thinking or reasoning is still not fully developed. It's developing. So they only understand things in an abstract way.
Right.
Yes. Also, between the 5 to 9, they may not fully grasp what death is, but you need to tell them. And then they will keep asking more questions. Like, where did this person go to? Is heaven real? Is hell real? That's how they ask. Will I also die?
So what can I say as a parent?
You need to tell them the truth. But if you've not accepted the truth yourself, it will be very hard for you to tell them.
Yeah.
So what most parents do is push away those questions, like, we'll talk about it later. And that later never comes to be. Or you tell them, oh, this person has gone to be an angel. Yet we are not fully aware what really happens in the afterlife. You can say it that way, but put a disclaimer. You can put a disclaimer and say, actually, this person has gone to be an angel, but
right.
I can't fully understand it. Some things I also don't understand as a parent. And it is okay for parents to not always be the tree of knowledge,
Yeah.
It is okay to even tell your child, let me go research, and then I'll come back to you with an answer. But don't tell them, let's talk about it later, and never have that later. Have that conversation with them, because they're curious. Their minds are growing now from abstract to trying to reason beyond the basic that they can see.
Right.
For the teen, they don't fully also grasp, because even me and you have not fully grasped it, but they understand to a certain level that this person is not coming back. For the younger ones, they might still be hoping against hope that this person will come. But the teen knows when someone dies, they're not coming back. But what's important for the teen is how you break the news and how you involve them even in the process. They would want to be asked, during the service, would you want to say something? Mm-hmm. During the celebration, what would you want to do? How do you want to celebrate your father? When it comes to the clothing, sometimes, okay, and I know we like to be formal. You just pick for them a suit. Ask them. The teen is moving from a place of control to you becoming a consultant. So even in this matter, consult them, involve them, talk to them, let them feel that they're part of the process that is moving forward. I think those would be some of the major pointers I would give. But on top of that, if they're crying, don't stop the crying again, like I said. Allow people to cry. If they're quiet, don't force them now to cry. Some of us think that if people have not cried, they've not grieved. That's a lie. Allow this child to now grieve in their own way. If they're having a sleepless night, stay up with them. Don't force them to go sleep. Don't force them to eat, because their bodies are trying to come to terms with what is happening. So right. They could be feeling nervous. They could be having butterflies. They could be having a running stomach. Because if you don't allow them to go through the grief process, there are consequences. They start regressing.
In what way?
You find a child who had been bedwetting and they had stopped, they go back to that place. If a child used to suck a thumb or a finger and they had stopped, now they go back to that place, because that's a place of comfort for them. Because you're not allowing them to be comfortable in the discomfort. So they're looking for a place where they used to feel comfortable and they regress back to it.
Right.
Yes. If they used to just... If this is a child who had just been potty trained, you have to go back to potty training.
Back to diapers.
Yes, so that's regression. if you don't allow them to go through the loss and grief. Some of them will also just refuse to go back to school after the celebration, because they're feeling, I may not be rejected, I may not be accepted back in school, so they refuse school. Some may just go into delinquency because they're feeling, what is all this happening? No one is involving me. I'm feeling so lost.
To act out.
Yes, they act out.
Attention.
Yes, or they act out the emotions. You're not allowing them to pent out. So allow them to vent it. Allow them to go through the process. If not that, for the teens, they go into drugs and alcohol. They go into bad company. They go into behavior that is not acceptable for their age. So if we don't allow them, they will find a way of venting out those emotions, and it might be a very negative way.
Right.
Yeah.
As a professional, is there anything, as I know you've said it at the beginning, that all of us grieve differently, and there's no, there's no system to it.
Yeah.
But is there anything like too much grieving? Or at what point do you know, or do you need to be aware that you need to get professional help?
Some few pointers, especially after the celebration, and it's been like a month, you're still not eating, you're not sleeping, just the basics. You're not going back to your old self, like your personality. Those are pointers to seek help.
Right.
If you're not able to start going back to work and readjusting back to your normal activities and trying to find new meaning, that's a pointer for you to seek help. If still, like many months later, you hear the news and you're breaking down and it's like it's still all fresh, you're stuck somewhere in the grief stage. So you need to seek help. The crying never stops. I think I've lost my dad for 4 years now. And I met a friend of his last week, and I shed a tear or two, but that was it. I was able to continue with life that day. But if I had broken down completely and it's like it's still fresh, then I would have said, here, I need help. So I will say that the crying will never stop. The pain never goes away. You actually learn to live with the pain, but it gets easier day by day. So it never totally goes away. There's not a day you will say, I'm over the loss and grief process.
And I'm okay.
No. But what you need to do is you need to move forward, because if you don't move forward, you get complicated grief. And complicated grief is where you had not dealt with the loss of one person, another person comes.
That can be overwhelming.
Yes.
That can be overwhelming.
So your system even shuts down, and some of us become numb to life, numb to just being happy, numb to just crying, numb to just the normal sadness. And we get what we call complicated grief, which can also manifest physically in terms of migraines, in terms of high blood pressure, in terms of ulcers, because our systems are handling too much, and we're not allowing our systems to release what is coming in. So we need to allow ourselves to go through the loss and grief process. If that doesn't happen also, what happens is at some point, you just die yourself. You're the walking dead. You're just there.
Going through the motions.
Going through the motions of life. And this is where, sadly, as a parent, your children are growing up and you're not seeing them growing up. Yes. You wake up one day and you're like, when did you grow up? But it's because you got stuck somewhere. Maybe it was the shock, and you've remained in the shock stage for such a long time that life is happening and you're not able to be in the present. But you're stuck back at what happened with the loss and grief.
So talking about being present and trying to get unstuck.
Yes.
What tips can you share with families when they're trying to move forward? Of course, I know there's no system to it, but what tips can you share that come top of mind on how families can move forward when loss and grief happens?
When loss and grief happens, you need to be there for each other. In as much as you're taking care of yourself, you need your family more than ever at that point in time. So keep checking up on each other. I keep saying the golden rule, keep listening to each other still. But what I would also say is look out for each other. And if you see you need extra help, it is okay. It is very okay. I know we live in an era where we look at asking for help as a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength to say that I need help at this point in time. Please come and support me. If you're feeling things are too much and you can't talk within your family, talk with people outside. Actually, children speak to people they're close with outside the family better during loss and grief than with people inside their own family. Because they're thinking, mommy is going through the same pain. But if auntie comes and talks to me, I will talk to them. So what we can do for our children, link them up with their family, extended family members as much as possible so they can talk and be supported through the process. Then when they come back in, you can also now continue to support them. But as a parent yourself, you need to first go through the process yourself, because let's say if it's your spouse they've not lost their father, but you've also lost a spouse. So you also need to
deal on this side and on this other side.
Yes. And it is okay for you sometimes to say it's too much. And also sometimes you also need to put up a brave face. I know sometimes we have to, as mothers, to allow our children to move through the process of loss and grief. So it's to find a balance, what works for this family, because we say each family is a system. So in this system, what works for us?
Yeah.
How do we deal with issues? And the way we've been dealing with issues, is it healthy or unhealthy? If it's been unhealthy, let's look for healthy ways.
Right.
And if there are healthy ways, let's keep doing that. But also, let's, as a society, let's support this family to keep moving forward with life. If we made promises, allow me to say this, if we made promises that will continue to support this family,
we honor that.
Please, let's honor that promise. And let's support this parent who's been left behind, to support these children to be able to move forward with life. Because sometimes, as we're saying, loss and grief is part of life, it actually stops other people's lives.
True.
Like if it's the sole breadwinner who passed away, their lives come to a standstill, or their lives just get worse and shattered. And it becomes a nightmare after the celebration of this person.
Right.
Yes, so let's help these people to readjust. It may not be back to where they were, but we can help them readjust to be able to move forward and to progress with life.
So as you're winding up, Esther, when it comes to supporting families that are going through, or a family going through loss and grief, what are the do's and don'ts? What do we say? What must we not say? What are your pointers on that?
When it comes to saying, you don't have to say anything if you're not sure. Some of the things we say actually hurt more than bring healing. You know, some things that, and allow me not to quote, but some are very religious, but they're not very beneficial at that point in time. It's okay not to say anything, but what is important is to be there.
Your presence.
For me, yes. For me, when I was going through the loss of my dad, I remember the people who were there, more than even what people said.
And what people contributed.
Yes.
I know that's important, but people being there for you.
The presence
and
for me was
there.
key. I don't even remember the contributions, but I remember so-and-so came. I remember so-and-so hugged me. I remember so-and-so gave me tissue. I remember so-and-so giving me a plate of food. I remember so-and-so asking me, do you need to do your hair? I take you, you know? So being there is more important than even saying. That is what I would say. But if you really want to say something, ask yourself, with empathy, if I was in that position, if I said this, how would I take it in? So I think even in the loss and grief process, the key thing is also empathy, especially for the children. Try and put yourself in their shoes. Try and ask yourself, if I was that 2-year-old, if I was that 5-year-old, if I was that 9-year-old, if I was that 11, how would I be feeling and what would I want? I think with empathy, you can be able to support the children and the family in a better way.
Thank you as always for coming to share, your insights, your expertise. And today we are talking about loss and grief. I know a lot of families, and all families at some point have to deal with it. I know your pointers will be of great help to a family out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was a tough topic for me as well, but for me, it's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Today's Parent. On today's episode, we were talking about loss and grief, on how we can help families cope better when it comes to grief or death in the family, especially the children who are often left out. I hope you found the tips that were shared by our counselor, psychologist Esther Mbao to be useful to you, and we hope they come in handy when time comes. Thank you for watching today's show. I've been your host, Christine Casina, and we've been here at Little Cribs, the home of exciting kids furniture that are durable and affordable. For parenting resources, go to www.supermamas.co.ke. See you next time.